So while the DC United versus Atlanta United game is currently on, I am quickly going to basically do the review of the first six games of the opening week of MLS, and then I of course will be finishing the last six game and basically switch the board to review the last six game after the LAFC versus Sporting KC game. That way I don't have to just do all 12 of these games after the LAFC versus Sporting KC game, and it kind of saved me a little bit of time. But yeah, let's begin with Philly, who play against TFC in the opening game of the MLS season. And by the way, if you were the road team for this opening game or the opening week of the MLS season, then you had a very good week. And if you are a player that is either debuting in MLS or you're debuting with another team in MLS, you also had a very good day too, because there was a lot of players that made their debut in MLS or made a debut with another team that score in this first weekend of MLS. But like I said, we begin with Philly versus TFC, which Philly, of course, lost that one by a final score of 3-1 to TFC. And this game was very chippy. This was a very chippy game, especially in the second half, where I kind of feel like the referee kind of lost a little bit control of the game. I mean, there was a lot of just dirty fouls. There was a lot of kind of pushing and shoving, and I think at one moment in the second half, all the players kind of gathered up each other and was just getting in each other's faces. And yeah, the game kind of went a little bit out of control. And there was also some controversy in this game because, it's MLS, and since every single week every single week we're definitely going to have some controversy because of how the referee in this league is definitely not very good. But of course I'll get to that first, and actually just get to it straight away. Before Michael Bradley, of course, score a goal from Aro to De Leon, right around the 34th minute, TFC actually won a penalty, but when you look on the replay and when that Union player was sliding down to trying to block the ball to put it back into the middle of the box, it hit his shoulder more than his hand. But apparently the referee says that it hit his hand, and they gave the penalty to TFC. Obviously, Union fans were absolutely fuming about that call. But fortunately for them, Andre Blake was able to save that penalty after Osorio missed the penalty. Osorio really did not have a very good day today. And later on, I'll talk about how he even conceded a penalty in this game. But as I said before, Michael Bradley gets the first goal of the season from Aro and De Leon right on the stroke of halftime. So, if you're the Union, that is probably the worst way to concede in a game besides right at the end of the game, because anytime when you concede right on the stroke of halftime, yeah, it not only changes the team talks, but it's kind of agonizing because you thought you would maybe head to halftime all square and 0-0, but you find yourself down 1-0. And then in the second half, it's Bradley again scoring in the 62nd minute. So Michael Bradley with 2 goals in this game. And as much as I criticize, and I'm pretty sure a lot of TFC fans also criticize of the performance he had against Independiente, he was very good in this game, scoring the 2 goals. But Philly did had an answer, and this is where I go back to Osorio of how he did not really had a good day. First missing the penalty, and now he conceded a penalty after committing a handball inside the box. Marco Fabian on his debut is able to put away that penalty. And then the Union looked like they equalized about 10 minutes later when it looked like when they hit the ball, it tore the back of the net. It looked like as the ball was about to cross the line, it looked like it came across the line and Bradley kind of just cleared it off the line. But on the replay, it showed that Bradley was able to just clear that one off the line. Not by much, but just enough that when you look at it, it's clearly not over the line and it shouldn't be a goal. And the fact that it actually took a long time for them to decide that of course is not a goal kind of surprised me, because does that mean MLS does not have goal line technology and that they could have just go to VAR and VAR could have just used goal line technology to see that happen? So I'm a bit surprised that took a little bit long. And then TFC, of course, pretty much shut the door in this game after De Leon scores from Osorio in stoppage time. So Osorio, despite the fact that he did concede a penalty and also miss a penalty, at least he did get on the board for an assist. And for TFC, this is a much needed win for them. And if you're a TFC fan, this is exactly what you want your team to do this season. And this is what exactly they wanted throughout these last couple of weeks. It has just been a miserable last couple of weeks if you are a TFC fans, from losing Javinko, losing Victor Vasquez, and then getting embarrassed in CCL play. Coming into this season, I don't think a lot of TFC fans would have thought that the first game of the season on the road against the Union, and they can bag all 3 points out of Philly. So certainly they will be very happy about that. And as for the Union, certainly this would be very kind of disappointing. And in some way, I'm pretty sure a lot of Union fans are kind of thinking about last year all over again, where they start the season very poor, and now they're just really hoping that they, of course, would eventually get things going. Which, when you put in a new system like what the Union is doing this season, yeah, obviously you're going to get off to a bad start because players are still not very familiar with the position. I mean, they did it throughout the preseason, but it's not in a competitive match. Playing your new system in a preseason is completely different animal than it is in a competitive match. And this is also why I've been saying playing in the preseason is completely different. Preseason games usually don't matter. It's when the regular season begin, you can see how much different it is. Shots in this game, Philly had 17 shots over 8 that TFC had. Shots on goal, Philly has 4 compared to 5 that TFC has. They had 7 shot off target compared to 2 that TFC had. They had 6 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that TFC had. And Philly had 62% possession compared to 38% possession. So Philly pretty much dominate in terms of every category, but they just could not able to get a win in this game. And, despite the fact that they did have majority of the possession and certainly had most of the shot, they weren't really challenging TFC enough. And that 7 shot on target, off target, kind of shows the story. But next up, Orlando. So they drew 2-2 against NYCFC, and NYCFC actually blew a 2-0 lead in this game, but they are very fortunate that they did not lose this game, and in many ways they should have lost this game. Orlando City clearly got robbed with another controversial penalty situation, another controversial handball that the ref made a bad decision of whether or not if it's a penalty or not, but we'll of course get to that. In the first half, Afari scores from Jonathan Lewis in the 14th minute. What a goal that was from Ebenezer Afari. Just hits it right outside of the box and just laser that one in the left side of the post. And then Alexander Ring scores from Alexandro Matrida in the 45th minute. So Matrida on his debut getting an assist, which certainly is good for him. I mean, it's not a goal for him, which is something that NYCFC want to see Matrida do, but at least he got an assist in this game. But then in the second half, Orlando City really started to come back to this game. Well, to be fair, Orlando City, they were doing pretty well in the first half. They're kind of a little bit unfortunate, the fact that they went down 2-0 at halftime, but they started to come back into this game. Chris Mueller scores in the 59th minute, which, Sean Johnson, I don't know how in the world did he not save that. I mean, Mueller basically hits that one from a free kick, and okay, I understand whenever whenever a player deliver a free kick in a dangerous position, if you're the goalkeeper, you got to make a decision whether you come out or you just stay put. And it looks like Sean Johnson just kind of got caught in two minds, and he, of course, just let that one by him. And Orlando City, of course, got one back. And then NYCFC looked like they were going to get that third goal after Maxi Morales actually went one-on-one with Brian Rowe, and Brian Rowe, of course, made a big save, and that save really kind of turns in terms of how the result would happen, because in the 75th minute, Tesha Alcandeli on his debut scoring from Dom Dwyer and Nani. So Nani is another guy that is able to get on the board and get an assist in this game after making his debut and just coming off the bench a couple minutes ago. And it's 2-2 Orlando City. But then 5 minutes later, Orlando City thought that they got a penalty after it looks like Chanot handballed it into the box. They go to VAR to look at that instant, and guess what happened? They said that's not a penalty. And when you look at VAR, it was so blatant that Chanot basically extended his arm to basically prevent that ball to cross into a dangerous area, that I do not know how in the world that is not a penalty. And I'm pretty sure Orlando City fans are absolutely just furious with that call, and they have the right to be furious about. That is no doubt a penalty in any kinds of situation. And in the end, of course, this game ends 2-2, but like I said, Orlando City, they kind of got robbed in terms of that decision and probably should have got all 3 points in this game. And for NYCFC, they are very fortunate to walk out of Orlando with a point in this game because, I wouldn't say NYCFC didn't play very well, but, they kind of got really lucky with that penalty kind of call that kind of was in favor of them, even though it shouldn't been, and that it should have been a penalty that goes against them. But in terms of the shots in this game, both teams actually had 13 shots in this game. NYCFC actually outshot Orlando City in terms of shots on goal 6-4. Both teams had 4 shots off target. Orlando City had 5 block shots compared to 3, and Orlando City had 58% possession compared to 42% possession that NYCFC had. So, at the end of the day, like I said, NYCFC I would think that they would be happy to walk out with a point, even though they blew a 2-0 lead. And if you're Orlando City, there's definitely progress. I think this team definitely, with the way that they play in this game, definitely look better than what they were last season. But then again, this is what Orlando City does every single season. They always tend to get off to a good start, and then they kind of fizzle out at the second half of the season. So we're going to wait until probably these first couple of games, see how Orlando City plays, and see if they can continue this throughout the season. But next up, Columbus. They drew 1-1 against the defending Supporter Shield winner, the Red Bulls, and I should say the short-handed Red Bulls, because the Red Bulls really didn't play most of their starter. They didn't even bring BWP and Daniel Royer to this game, and even left Kaku on the bench, which I believe he didn't even play in this game. He was an unused sub. But they basically put on their reserve in this game, and in the first 5 minutes, it looks like that actually paid off, because once again, Ivan, the same guy that scored his first goal with the Red Bulls just a couple of days ago, scored his first ever MLS debut goal from Valid and Murillo. And it's just something about the Red Bulls of how every time when you have a rookie come into that team and they play their first ever MLS game and they score on their debut. This has just happened so many times, and like I said back in the CCL review, it's not a bad thing, but it's kind of strange of how the Red Bulls always tends to have these guys that make their first MLS start and they score on their debut. But it also kind of contribute in terms of how good the Red Bulls bench is and just how good this academy and their affiliate team is doing right now. But Columbus did get the equalizer right before halftime. Saro scores from Higuain, so the Argentine connection there between Saro and Higuain was able to get the equalizer for Columbus, and that would be the end of the scoring. Although in the second half, the Red Bulls looked like they retook the lead, but the linesman, of course, waved that goal off after he deemed that one of the Red Bull player that ended up scoring the goal was in an offside position. And I'm not quite sure did they actually look at VAR or not, but when you look on the replay, it looked very, very close. And I'm going to be talking about another game that has a very similar situation, and in fact another two game that had a very similar situation of that Red Bull goal that was disallowed, that was offside, and it was very similar in terms of how close the offside call was. But in terms of the shots in this game, it was pretty close. The Red Bulls had 14 shots compared to 13 that Columbus had. They had 5 shots on goal compared to 4 that Columbus had. 7 shots off target compared to 5. 2 shots that was blocked compared to 4 that Columbus had. And Columbus had 67% possession compared to 33% possession. But, if you're the Red Bulls, I'm pretty sure you're happy with a point. You weren't really playing your starters in this game because you have to play against Santos Laguna, which I believe that's an away game for them. So obviously they need to rest most of their starters in this game. And if you're Columbus, on one hand, it's good that you got a point against potentially one of the best team in the league. But at the same time, the Red Bulls wasn't playing their strongest team. And since they were playing at home, you would think that they're going to be a little bit disappointed that they didn't get all 3 points in this game. But next up, Dallas. They also drew 1-1 against New England. So in the first half, Dallas got off to a quick start from Michael Barrios from Baji in the 13th minute. And then Dallas really kind of dominate majority of the possession and majority of the chances in the first half, but New England started to kind of come back to life. And then in the second half, in the 57th minute, Carlos Gil, making his debut for New England, scores from Delamay and Anabao, and just like that, it was 1-1, and that, of course, is your final score of this game. In terms of the shots, both teams had 9 shots in this game. FC Dallas had 3 shots on goal compared to 2 that New England has. Shots off target, New England had 6 compared to 3 that FC Dallas had. Block shots, FC Dallas had 3 compared to 1 that New England has. And the possession-wise, this is actually 68% that FC Dallas had compared to 32% possession that New England has. And, certainly for New England, I think this draw kind of feel like a win for them because, coming into this season, a lot of Revs fans, they're happy with the way that their front office finally got a big acquisition in Carlos Gil, which seems like it kind of had paid off after he's scoring on his debut. But they were still not very they're kind of concerned about the team and the fact that New England in the last couple of years have not done well in terms of season opener. This is going to definitely feel like a victory for them. And for FC Dallas, they get a draw in this game, but they're going to be a little bit disappointed that they didn't get 3 points against the team that you could say that they should have beat in this game. They especially what happened in the first half where they definitely looked like the more threatening team. You would think that potentially Dallas would have won this one. But next up, Houston and RSL also drew 1-1 in this game. And just like the Red Bulls, Houston also rested most of their starters. Although, this also kind of brings back to what I said about how, if you're Wilmer Cabrera and you know that you have to play a big game against Tigres in CCL, do you think about resting your starters in that big game? Or do you just risk it and just play your starters in this game and thinking that you probably have no chance against Tigres. And, on paper, when you look at it, it looked like Tigres potentially is going to be heavy favorites in that two-legged affair. And I think for the Dynamo, you might think that they should just accept the fact that they're probably not going to move on into CCL and that Tigres is going to beat them. But apparently, Wilmer Cabrera does not have that kind of mindset. He thinks that that's a game that he needs to put his strongest squad. And we shall see if that, of course, paid off. Because if you do that, that means you're going to have to sacrifice some of these MLS games. And, this RSL game that they face is going to be one of those games that they're going to have to sacrifice and put in a reserve team that, unlike the Red Bulls that has a decent reserve and a decent bench, Houston does not really have a decent bench. But in the first half, RSL scores from Rusnak and Bear, so certainly I'm very happy to see Corey Bear to get on the board. Consider he's one of my, if not my favorite player in the league besides of any of the Quakes player that is on my team. But then in the second half, Manotas, of course, scored from Lindquist and Figueroa. And then it looked like Houston was going to get a second goal. And this is where I go back to talk about something very similar to the Red Bulls and Columbus game, where it looked like Bonet Garcia was literally just on the line of the last defender, but apparently the linesman said he just was maybe a couple of feet offside. I don't remember if they actually go to VAR for that incident or not, but yeah, it was very, very close. And even if they go to VAR in this situation, it's gonna be very hard to kind of overturn that because it definitely did not look clear and obvious. And remember, when you go to VAR, you have to make sure that it's clear and obvious. And in that situation, it kind of wasn't really clear and obvious. And I know Dynamo fan will just disagree with me. They think that it really is. But when you look on the replay, it was very close. All right. And then Vera, of course, got sent off in the 82nd minute after he picked up his second yellow card. And that, of course, is your final score in this game between RSL and Houston. Shots in this game, RSL outshot Houston 14-8. They had 5 shots on goal compared to 1 that Houston had, and that one shot ended up into the back of the net for the Dynamo. Both teams had 4 shots off target. RSL had 5 that was blocked compared to 3 that was blocked. And in terms of the possession-wise, Houston had 53 possession compared to 47 that RSL has. So in terms of possession-wise, it was relatively close. But at the end of the day, I think, for both of these teams, they'll be happy with a point. RSL, we know how much they struggled last year on the road, and anytime you can get a point on the road after you know that you're not going to do very well on the road is definitely a good thing. And for Houston, getting a point knowing that you didn't play your best squad out of this game is certainly a good point to have. And now let's see if the Dynamo can potentially at least give a little bit of a fight toward Tigres. I mean, I don't expect Houston to move on. I think if they do move on against Tigres, it would be going down as one of the biggest upset in CCL history. But, if they give Tigres at least a little bit of a fight and at least try their best to really kind of make Tigres work to move on into the next round, then I think Houston will be very happy the fact that they sacrificed some of these MLS games in favor of taking of that challenge in CCL. But next up, Colorado and Portland play in the Snow Classico 3. So if you don't know what the Snow Classico is, it's usually a game that involves with the snow just completely falling down and the field completely covered with snow. And for the Rapids, they had a lot of Snow Classico game in recent year, and that has a lot to do with the fact that since usually they start some of their games in March and in April, it's still very cold in Denver by that time, and there's still a huge threat that potentially the game there is going to be snowing. And I know snow game is not very common in MLS because in MLS we go through a kind of summer calendar, so you usually never get a chance to see games that is going to be snowing. The only chance you'll see is probably at the beginning of the season or maybe late in the season. I think there was only one game that is late in the season and in the playoff in MLS history that was a snow classico. But whenever there's a snow classico, I definitely want to watch it. It's very fun to watch two teams, of course, playing in the snow. And usually in a snow classical, there's also tends to be some very strange thing that happens. And this game was nothing exceptional about that. In fact, it wasn't just strange. This was a crazy game that had almost everything in it. So in the first half, Kai Kamara scored his first goals with the Colorado Rapids from Acosta and Serna in the 15th minute. But then Portland equalized in the 29th minute with Valeri, and that was after Valeri missed a penalty. And this is where I have to kind of talk about that penalty and why I think that penalty really kind of pissed off both teams. Because one, if you're the Portland Timbers, you feel like they shouldn't had go to penalty because during the lead up to that penalty situation, when the ball was handballed by Soldierberg, who of course got sent off because of a denial of goal score opportunity with using his hand to basically save the ball from crossing the line. There was two Portland Timbers player ready to basically pounce on it, and they actually end up putting into the back of the net. So, if the ball is in the back of the net, why do you have to call? Why didn't you just had to play advantage? And I understand that Soldierberg was trying his best to kind of do a hand of God moment to prevent the ball crossing the line, but Portland at the end of the day still put the ball into the back of the net. And now you're basically calling back and said that they have to take a penalty to potentially score that goal. That's just, whenever that happened, that really drives a lot of people crazy because that goal should have counted. And then if you're Colorado, if that was the case, and if that, if the Timbers did score that second goal, if that goal did count after both of those Timber player basically hit it into the back of the net, then this red card would have never happened. The referee would have not had to go back and said that, oh, Soldierberg, that was a clear and denial of goal score opportunity using his hand. But since the Timbers, of course, put the ball into the back of the net, we're just going to pretend that instant never happened. But instead, the referee decided that, I have to call that situation. I have to say that's a denial of goal score opportunity, and I'm going to make the Portland Timbers take a penalty and basically wipe that goal that they put into the back of the net off the board. So, in many ways, this is very frustrating for both teams, and I think the overall thing that I'm trying to get out of this is that I feel like the referee just should have just played advantage, and Portland should have just got that goal. They didn't even need to go to they didn't have to do a penalty to basically score that goal that they literally just looked like they just scored a couple of minutes ago. But of course, unfortunately, that isn't the case, and Soldierberg of course got sent off. Colorado went down to 10 men, and then Portland of course got a goal right on the stroke of halftime from Sebastian Blanco and Valeri. And by the way, going back to this penalty kick, this was actually saved by Tim Howard, but fortunately for Valeri, he was able to put it into the back of the net. So let's just say if this penalty kick was actually saved by Tim Howard and it didn't come right back to Valeri, yeah, Portland fan would go absolutely nuts, because just a couple of minutes ago, two of their players was able to head the ball into the back of the net, but it was wiped off because the referee has to go back to that instant of how Soldierberg basically commit a denial of goal score opportunity. So, yeah, just a little bit more note of why I think both fan base would have been very pissed off about that decision. But in the second half, despite the fact that Colorado were down to 10 men, they actually got a goal back from Benny Feilhaber, who also scored his first ever goal for the Colorado Rapids to make it 2-2. But the Timbers did get a third goal, and it's a bit of an unfortunate one for the Rapids because Declan Wynn unfortunately put the ball into his own net for an own goal in the 66th minute. And you would think that, okay, look like the Timbers are just going to win this one. And, you know, the Timbers, they did not really play that spectacularly in this game. And obviously the stats doesn't really show that, which I'll of course get to in a minute. But they didn't really play like very spectacularly. And you could say that maybe the Rapids it's a little bit they'll be probably a little bit hard done that they didn't get anything out of this game. But unfortunately, that isn't the case because in the 94th minute, Shinya Shatsky scored his first ever goal in MLS, coming off the bench and scoring that in the 94th minute, and it's 3-3 at the end of the game. And I'll tell you what, Dick's Sporting Goods Park was just going absolutely nuts. And even though there wasn't a lot of people there to watch this game, you know, you can feel how the place was just rocking with maybe about 1,000 or 2,000 fans that is in there. And the announcer for the Rapids was just going absolutely nuts when that goal went in. And yeah, at the end of the day, it was a free draw for the Timbers and the Rapids. And in terms of the shots in this game, the Timbers had 24 shots in this game compared to 14 that the Rapids had. The Timbers had 7 shots on goal compared to 6 that the Rapids had. They had 7 shots on off target compared to 5 that the Rapids had. 10 shots was blocked for the Timbers compared to 3 that the Rapids had. So despite the fact that the Timbers had 24 shots in this game, 10 of them was actually blocked in this game, which just tells you how, you know, even when you look at the stats, it looked like the Timbers were really just putting a firing kind of display against Tim Howard and in terms of that Colorado Rapids defense. But it was more like the Colorado Rapids, every time when the Timbers trying to shoot on goal, it gets blocked away in this game. And in terms of the possession-wise, the Timbers had 58% possession compared to 42% that Colorado has. So at the end of the day, if you are a Rapids fan, you're going to be very happy about this result. I mean, the amount of fight and tenacity in this team and the resilience in this team was just incredible in this game. And if you're the Timbers, this has to be a very disappointing result. I mean, I know the fact that they were on the road and they were playing in just anything but good kind of weather condition, but still, you had a 3-2 lead heading late in the game, and you also were a man up. But yet you gave a goal late in the game, and you gave 2 goals away despite the fact that you were up a man in this game. So yeah, they'll be very disappointed about this one. But like I said, with Colorado, they would be very happy with this result. Consider how much fight and just heart that this team show in this game. But that being said, I am actually now going to go back and watch the DC versus Atlanta game, and I will see you guys at the end of the LAFC versus Sporting KC game, and by then I'm gonna change my board and review the rest of the game that we had in this opening weekend. Okay, so that is pretty much all the MLS action done in this opening week. This game just finished a couple of minutes ago, and what a way to finish the opening week of MLS with a last-minute winner. I mean, that is probably the perfect way to end opening week, and that is exactly what happened in this game. But, you know, overall, this game, besides the last-minute winner, this game will also remember as a game where it felt like a battle between both of these teams. Like, you know, Sporting KC, especially in the first half, looked very angry for some reason. And I'm not quite sure if this is because of them playing in CCL and that all of a sudden they think that they can be angry and just commit so many fouls and think that they can get away with it like they did in CCL, because that was the way they played. They really made a lot of ugly challenge toward LAFC, and I think the announcer even said at the end of the first half, Sporting KC had half of their player getting a yellow card. I mean, that was just, it's insane enough to have a team to have half of the team get booked by the end of the game, but it's unheard of if all those players get booked after just the first half, or half of those players that got booked after just the first half. But in the first half, Namath actually scores from Johnny Russell to take a 1-0 lead for Sporting KC. And I thought early on Sporting KC looked very threatening, but LAFC started to really build on the pressure, and that pressure eventually paid off in the second half when Rossi scored from Atuesta in the 47th minute. And then, it looked like for the last 20 minutes, Sporting KC was just holding on. I think most likely this is due to the fact that they were being very fatigued. Peter Vermees did not really make a lot of changes to this team, and I'm guessing the reason why he didn't make a lot of changes is that, when he played that CCL game in the midweek, he'll just rotate his second team to play Independiente, and that if he could just put the starter in this big game, then maybe they can walk out with a victory. Unfortunately, that's not exactly how it works, and they were just holding on for dear life, and unfortunately, it made it even more harder in the last 10 minutes when Espinoza, of course, getting sent off. And really, I think everybody knew that eventually there was going to be a red card in this game. The way that this game was and the way that both teams was just getting in each other's faces, a lot of hard foul. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the team is going to get a red card, and most likely Sporting KC is going to get a red card because of the fact that half of their team is already on a yellow card. And what do you know? Espinoza is the guy that takes that role, and really just the second yellow he received that foul was just so unnecessary. But I guess that's what happened when you've been playing angry throughout the whole game, and eventually, if you're gonna play angry and aggressive like that, your chances of getting a red card and your chances of making silly foul just completely goes up toward the roof. And then, Sporting KC, despite the fact that down to 10 men, they were still trying to hold on to get a 1-1 draw, and it looked like they finally did it until Diamande showed up and basically break Sporting KC hard with an absolute dagger right at the middle of the net. And yeah, there you go. It is 2-1 LAFC. Shots in this game, LAFC outshot Sporting KC 14-11. LAFC outshot in terms of shots on goal 6-5. Both teams had 5 shots off target, 3 that was blocked for LAFC compared to 1 that Sporting KC has. And the possession was actually pretty even, but when you look at the chances that was created, LAFC definitely had some really decent chances, especially in the second half. So for LAFC, this is definitely a good win. And for Sporting KC, yeah, this is pretty heartbreaking because you thought that you were able to walk out of Bank of California Stadium with a draw, but you didn't. And now they, of course, play against Independiente on Wednesday in CCL. And like I said, I think Peter Vermees is probably going to not put the same team as he did in this game against Independiente because, it looked like the team is very tired. And there is no way, with the way that this team looked very tired at the end, there's no way this team in a 3-day span will go down to Panama and basically is going to be even more refreshed as they were coming into this game. I will be shocked if Peter Vermees decided to go with the same team that he did in this game when he played against Independiente in the middle of the week. And speaking of that game, Sporting KC better be taking that game seriously, because I think TFC fan will really want to give an advice to Sporting KC that Independiente is no joke, and that if you are not careful, if you overlook them in the first leg, yeah, then you could definitely be in trouble. Now, TFC, of course, is not as good as what Sporting KC is. Sporting KC has a lot of quality in this team, but just saying, Independiente did beat TFC 4-0, and this is a team that should definitely not be overlooked at all. So, yeah, but meanwhile, moving on into and back to the Saturday match, Vancouver, they lost this one to Minnesota by a final score of 3-2, and Minnesota with a row win. I mean, that's actually now equal the amount of row wins that they had last season, which they only had one row win last season, and it's hard to believe the fact that they already equal that mark on opening day. But they got a 3-2 win over Vancouver. Vancouver did get on the board in the first half thanks to Godoy from Reina, and by the way, Godoy is Eric Godoy, no relation to Anibal Godoy, that is the midfielder for the San Jose Earthquakes. But then Minnesota did tie it up after they won a penalty. Quintero made absolutely no mistake with the penalty, puts it on the top right, and it was 1-1 heading into halftime. Second half, that's when Minnesota started to take control, and Minnesota looked very deadly going forward on the attack in this game. Francesco Calvo scores from Quintero and Romero Ibarra in the 66th minute, and then Romero Ibarra himself getting a goal in the 70th minute from Quintero. So Quintero, 1 goal and 2 assists. He had a monster game in this match. Vancouver did try to mount a comeback with Henry from Gyro and Boone in the 81st minute, but unfortunately that comeback falls short, and Minnesota walk out of BC Place with a victory, and the first row victory for Minnesota, and also now tied with the amount of row wins that they have last season. And for Minnesota, obviously coming out of this game, you're going to be very happy with this row win, but there are still a little bit concerned in terms of the defense. At times, this Minnesota defense did look very similar to last year, but my God, this attack, if you thought last year the attack was good, this year the way that they attack in this game, this team can definitely score easily 50 or even 60 goals this season. Shots in this game, Minnesota outshot Vancouver 15-11. Both teams had 4 shots on goal. Minnesota had 10 shots off target compared to 2. Vancouver had 5 shots blocked compared to 1 that Minnesota has. And the possession-wise was actually dead even. Both teams had 50% possession. But at the end of the day, Minnesota is able to win this one. And for Vancouver, I think for Whitecaps fan, they need to be a little bit patient in terms of this season. And, I think this game kind of shows you how the chemistry level of this team is clearly not there. This team still needs to get up to speed and just get to know each other a little bit more. And I think maybe by the time, I would say, they didn't play bad in this game, except maybe on the defensive end, because they did make a couple of mistakes on the defensive end. But I think if they get to know each other a little bit better and that chemistry starts to build up for this team, I think Vancouver can definitely be a very decent team. I think for Whitecaps fan, don't panic the fact that you lost this one. It happens whenever you build a new roster, and that when you build a new roster like that, and kind of like what I said about Vancouver being almost like an expansion team heading into this opening weekend, yeah, that can happen in the first week where most likely you are going to lose because most of your teammates don't actually know each other and haven't built that chemistry that will basically work out for your team. But next up, the Galaxy, they won 2-1 against the Chicago Fire, and at that time, the Galaxy was actually the first team to win a home opener. The previous 6, I think, games, the road team was able to get at least a point, and I think there was also 2 road team that was able to get a win. But the Galaxy were the first home team to get get a win in this game. There was no score in the first half, and this game I was quite surprised the fact that there wasn't more goals in this game, because at time there was some very interesting kind of action, and there was definitely a lot of chances for both teams to score more than the 3 goals combined that was in this game. And then in the second half, Sapon scores for Chicago to take a 1-0 lead. And you remember how last year the Galaxy defense was absolutely garbage, and that they made some really just schoolboy defending mistake? Well, unfortunately, new season, same old mistake for the Galaxy defense. And ironically, the guy that made the mistake in this situation was Diego Palanta. The guy that they brought in to shore up the defense made an absolute horrendous back pass, and then basically Sapon basically intercepted that one, go round Bingham, and puts it into the back of the net. And yeah, I think when Galaxy fans saw that goal, they're probably thinking, oh my god, are you kidding me? Here we go again. The defense is going to give up 60 plus goals once again, because this looks very similar to what we did last season, and the fact that it happened to the guy that they just bought to shore up that defense and pretty much fix that mistake, yeah, that must be very infuriating if you're a Galaxy fan. But thankfully, their attack did step up. Sterry, of course, scores from Alvarez, who, this Alvarez kid, this is a kid that you really need to keep an eye on, because he's a 16-year-old wonder kid, and that, right now there is a discussion of whether or not should he play for the US or Mexican national team. Hopefully he plays for the US, but he is a very talented 16-year-old, and this pass to Sterry was just absolutely beautiful. And if this is something that he is going to do week in and week out, he could definitely be a very good player. And again, I'm really hoping he chooses the US rather than Mexico, but I have a feeling most likely he probably would choose Mexico, because the US Soccer Federation, they're pretty inept in terms of trying to convince a player to join their national team rather than join El Tri. So yeah, but at that point it ties the game up at 1, and then who else but none other than Zlatan getting the second goal to win it for the Galaxy, and that, of course, is your final score. Shots in this game, Chicago actually outshot the Galaxy 17-3. Both teams had 5 shots on goal. Chicago had 7 shots off target compared to 5 that the Galaxy had. The Chicago Fire had 5 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that the Galaxy has, and the Chicago Fire actually outpossessed the Galaxy 56% to 44%. But unfortunately, despite the fact that they kind of dominate most of the stats, they still lose this game. And for the Galaxy, this is definitely off to a good start. I mean, the only negative is the goal that they conceded, where it looked very similar to last year, but hey, at least they got off to a good start. And if you're the Fire, it's a bit of a disappointment that you threw a 1-goal lead in this game. But the Fire, they haven't been doing very well on the road for the last couple of seasons. So this game, it definitely didn't look like they were maybe potentially get something away from this one. But either way, moving on into the game that I, of course, attended, which is the Quakes and Montreal. And for the first time since 2013, the San Jose Earthquakes dropped their season opener against the Montreal Impacts by a final score of 2-1. And as much as I'm very disappointed about this game, I had a feeling that we were probably going to drop our season opener, considering the fact that, I said it throughout the offseason, where when you have a team that basically is literally the same team that coming into this season as the one last year that won 4 games, you are not really going to make a lot of improvement. And this is despite the fact that we got Almeida. It's good that we got Almeida, but if you don't decided to get rid of some of the deadwood that we had in this team and basically brought in some new piece to kind of short things up, that of course would happen, and now it pretty much kind of reflect in this game because the deadwood that we had in terms of the midfield and the attack is pretty much the reason why we lost this game. There was absolutely no end product in this game for us. I mean, we had a ton of possession, and the passing, I think, for most part was good, except for the final third passes, but the end product and the chances created was really next to non-existent. When you look at the midfield, Godoy had another bad game, and once again, every time that he has the ball, it seemed like he just slows down the attack. Judson actually had a pretty decent game in terms of the defensive end. He didn't really contribute a lot on the attacking end, but that, of course, I didn't expect Judson to really contribute a lot on the attacking end because he's more of a holding midfielder and he's more kind of a defensive-minded holding midfielder. And then when you look at the attackers that we had, Vako, I think he was probably the best attackers that we had in this game. But still, at times, he did something that he did last season, which is just holding on to the ball way too long. Eriksson, he did score the goal here in the 11th minute from Vako and Godoy, but besides the goal that he scored, he didn't really do anything. And Espinoza, of course, making his debut for the Quakes, didn't really had a very good debut. He was keep trying to crossing the ball into the box, and every time it just not really accurate enough. And then also Wando. I mean, I almost forgot Wando actually played in this game. I thought we were just playing with 10 men in this game because Wando basically didn't do anything. And it isn't like we didn't give him enough service. We gave him service in this game, but his whole up play in this game was just so bad that every time the ball comes to him, one of the Montreal player would easily intercept him. He just does not have that hold up play in his... Well, he's more of a poacher kind of player, not really kind of like a hold up kind of player throughout his career. So I don't understand why exactly we just keep puffing long balls toward him, and that it just also seemed like he never tends to get in a good position. And I also think that it's pretty clear that after this game, we cannot play Wando as a long striker. I mean, I think after this game, rather, Wando should not be out there and should be relegated to the bench and being a super sub, or Houston has to be there with Wando, because with Wando playing as a lone striker in that game, he was absolutely non-existent in that game. But going back to the game itself, Piatti, of course, scores from Taider to tie the game up. And, Piatti, that was just individual brilliance, the way he scored that goal. The way that he just completely outdone Espinoza and then hits it onto the right side, which, Vega probably should have done a little bit better. But, it's Piatti, okay? And anytime when Piatti gets on the score sheet, if you're an opposition fan, you do not have a good feeling that this is you're gonna get a result out of this, because every time when Piatti gets on the score sheet, 9 out of 10 times Montreal is going to win. Taider, of course, then scored right before halftime from Dallo. Now, this one was a bit of a controversial one, because today I found out that when I look at the image of this goal, it looked like Taider was offside. And they didn't go to VAR for this incident. There was no mentioning of the fact that we were going to go to VAR. And, looking at the picture again, I think maybe Taider was a hair offside. But then again, when I compare it to the offsides from that Houston and Red Bulls game, they look all very similar. And both of those games, the goal were, of course, disallowed. So why is this goal being stand? I mean, if those goals were being disallowed, if those were very close, then why is this being disallowed? That is kind of what frustrates me in terms of the refereeing decision, because at times, even when they do get it wrong, they sometimes get it wrong on some cases, but then they don't get it wrong on some cases. There seems to be this inconsistent kind of refereeing that is going on in the league, and that just makes me very frustrated. And the other thing that makes me even more frustrated is that this was the winning goal. Because if this goal would have been called off, it would have been 1-1. We would have at least got a point out of this game. But I think the bottom line is, I'm not going to just blame this as the reason why we lost this game, and I'm not going to blame the referee as the way that we just lost this game. The reason why we lost this game is we just didn't do enough on the attack. It's simple as that. Shots in this game, we had 14 shots compared to 10 that Montreal has, but most of those shots were not really close at all, and Evan Bush didn't really need to do much in this game. He did make one save in this game. I think it was, I forgot who it was, but one of our players basically struck it straight into him, and that was really the hardest save that he had to make throughout the game. We had 4 shots on goal compared to 3 that Montreal has. We had 7 shots off target compared to Montreal also getting 7 shots. And we had 3 shots that was blocked compared to none that Montreal has. We had 66% possession compared to 34% that Montreal has. But at the end of the day, it was Montreal that gets the result. And I think the bottom line for the Quakes is that there is still a lot of work to be done. And this is why I'm just being pessimistic about this year, because I know for a fact that when you look at this team, it just feels like we still have pretty much the same deadwood as we had from last season. And unless if Almeida works wonders and really grow into this team, he can only take this team as far as what he could do. I mean, the manager, he can do everything correct in terms of the tactical point, but if the players are not executing those tactics, then yeah, there's nothing the manager can really do about that. But next up, Cincinnati. Well, Seattle pretty much just taught Cincinnati a lesson in terms of being in MLS, because yeah, Cincinnati did not look like they were ready for this game. Now, to be fair, Cincinnati actually got on the board first thanks to Burton, who scored an absolutely laser kind of shot. And I think this is probably going to be the goal of the week, because, this is the first goal ever for FC Cincinnati in terms of their MLS history. And yeah, that was just an absolutely amazing goal, but that was really the only thing that the Cincinnati fans can cheer about. And I also got to give a lot of credit to the Cincinnati fans that travel all the way from Cincinnati to go to CenturyLink Field to watch this game. They had a really amazing support, and they were going absolutely nuts when this goal went in. But unfortunately, Cincinnati kind of being on cloud 9 kind of ended after the 27th minute when Leerdam, of course, equalized for the Seattle Sounders. And then Jordan Morris, of course, scoring a goal from Ladero in the 33rd minute. He would do the same thing in the 43rd minute from Rodriguez and Ladero. And honestly, whenever Jordan Morris gets on the board, just like how Corey Bear gets on the board, I'm obviously saying yes, thank you for that, because Morris is one of my favorite player in MLS. And can we say that he is can we say that, I know it might sound too early, but can we say that he might win Comeback Player of the Year award? I mean, the way that he performed in this game, it looked like he can potentially score 15 or 20 plus goal, and if he does that, no doubt he has to be the Comeback Player of the Year. And then in the second half, Rui Diaz basically scored from Rodriguez. That's just pretty much kind of running up the score from the Sounders. And the final score is 4-1 in favor of FC Cincinnati. Shots in this game, Seattle dominate the shot count. 24 shots in this game compared to 7 that Cincinnati has. 9 shots on goal compared to 3 that Cincinnati had. 7 shots off target compared to 1 that Cincinnati had. 8 block shot compared to 3 that Cincinnati has. And Seattle had 64% possession compared to 36% possession that Cincinnati had. So these stats are actually very similar to the LAFC game a year ago when Seattle plays them. The only difference is this time Seattle puts away their chances, and really FC Cincinnati, they look really broken in terms of the defense. Like, this team was trying to be a low block kind of team. Yeah, it definitely did not work out very well for them. And I think for Cincinnati, there is still a lot of work to do. And this is why I said that it doesn't seem like they're kind of ready for MLS, especially from what we saw in the preseason. But, at least it's good that Cincinnati did get a goal, and at least they got something to cheer about, and at least it's a good goal too. I mean, if it's a kind of tap in, then yeah, that's good, but it's just a tap in. This was an absolute laser of a goal, and that's going to be something that Cincinnati fan will always remember and talk about throughout the years. But unfortunately, in this game, they just couldn't quite keep up with the Sounders kind of juggernaut. And really, the main story of this game is Jordan Morris coming back from injury, playing his first MLS game in almost a year and a half, and scoring a brace. And then finally, DC getting a 2-0 win against Atlanta United. So Atlanta, they kind of rest their starters and kind of didn't. I mean, I think they made only 2 changes in terms of their roster. They didn't put Pity Martinez in until late in the game. And by the way, I don't understand why exactly Frank de Boer decided to bring in the starters that he rests in the second half when they were down 2-0. I mean, yes, you're down 2-0 and you need to bring in your starter to maybe rescue a point. But at that point, throughout this game, it didn't look like Atlanta was going to get anything out of this game. It looked like Atlanta was just getting absolutely outplayed by DC United. And, the scoreline, of course, indicate that. And this is also why I say DC United is one of the most dangerous teams heading into this season, because the way that they played this season, or the way that they play in this game, really tells me that this team can definitely be a top 3 team and definitely can finish 3rd place as I predicted in my prediction. But in the first half, Ariola scores right on the stroke of halftime to give DC a 1-0 lead. And then Lucho Acosta, who there's been a lot of question whether or not coming into this year, is he going to replicate what he did last year, and whether if that failed PSG move was going to affect him. Doesn't seem like it, because he scored a goal in this game, and he was basically running the show in terms of the attacking end. And this goal, to be fair, Acosta of course scored the goal, but at the same time, I would also want to say that Guzan probably should have saved this one. I mean, when Acosta struck this one, it was kind of right to Guzan, but Guzan just kind of mishandled it, and then it hits into the back of the net. So yeah, but take nothing away from Lucho Acosta and how he was just, he was a big problem for Atlanta to face. And it just seemed like Lucho Acosta loved to play against Atlanta. Like, the last couple of games when he play against Atlanta, he tends to show up and tends to play his best. He tends to save his best performance for this game. But at the end of the day, DC, of course, getting the win. Shots in this game, DC had 17 shots compared to 9 that Atlanta has. They had 6 shots on goal compared to 2. 8 shots off target compared to 5 that Atlanta has. 3 of them was blocked compared to 2. Atlanta did had 56% possession. I know it says 66, but it's actually 56 there. I, of course, miswrote that on the board, but DC United, of course, having 44% possession, and overall, DC pretty much dominate every category except the possession wise, and most of the possession was kind of like late in the game, with Atlanta kind of started to take control a little bit when they bring in their starters. But again, I don't understand, why do you need to bring in your starters when you know that you're probably going to lose this one, and that you have a midweek game, a big CCL midweek game against Monterey, and, just take the loss. I mean, I know it doesn't sound right to just kind of give up like that. But I feel like for Atlanta, if they really want to prioritize CCL and want to be the first team ever to win CCL, they got to focus mainly on CCL. They need to do something that TFC did, which is sacrifice some of these games. You know, when you look at this game, it's already a lost cause. Might as well just sacrifice it and move on into the next game. Now, this is not really a mentality that you're going to do every single game, but when you when you're in a game and in a competition that you really want to win, you should of course prioritize that competition. And I think that's something that Frank de Boer need to understand. And yeah, it will be very interesting to see how they will play against Monterrey. And if they lose big against Monterrey, yeah, Frank de Boer is gonna be under a lot of heat for what he did late in the game by subbing all his starters and hoping that somehow they can rescue a point or even win in DC and win at Audi Field. But yeah, there we have it. That is pretty much it for my review. Obviously, I know this review has been over an hour long. I'm gonna try next time to keep it a little bit shorter, but there's always a lot of talks in terms of what happened in these games. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I hope to see you guys next time.